Hi, Jem. We're so happy to have you today.
Hi, nice to see you.
You too. Thank you for being here. So, today we are talking about how to burn fat without keto. And that's a great topic because, we're getting told all the time sometimes that that's the only option. Keto is the way to go. And everyone doesn't respond to keto, particularly women, hint, hint, who
Yes.
are still menstruating. So, we're talking today about how to burn fat without keto because that's what we want to all do is learn how to teach our bodies to burn fat. So, before we dive into that, could you tell us just a little bit about your background and how you got to where you are today?
Yeah. So, hey guys. Um, I'm Jenn Trepeck. I am a health coach. I have a specialty in weight management. And I came to all of this through my own saga. I feel like the word journey doesn't do it justice, right? Like it was a saga of, I sort of joke that I grew up the skinny one in a family of dieters. And that was, great. And then it went away. And so it went away sort of between like high school and college, right? I was a dancer growing up. So uh, when life changed, right, and lifestyle, it was dramatic for me. And I was like, okay, well, I know what to do because I watched my family do this my whole life. And I tried every diet under the sun, like gained and lost, that yo-yo roller coaster, whatever you want to call it. And every time I tried a different diet, a different plan, and there isn't something out there that I haven't done, my family hasn't done, or we don't know somebody who's done it. And even when I learned about the program that I now teach, I was like, no, that's okay. I've got my thing, right? Like my thing was that craziness, but I thought that's what it was, you know? So I saw people though who were following this plan. And I remember having a moment of like, Jennifer, they know something you don't know. And the moment that sparked that was this woman telling her story of losing like 150 pounds. And I couldn't see where 10 pounds could have been on her body, right? Like that did not compute in my brain. And people were keeping the weight off. They weren't doing the up and down thing that I had been doing. So I was like, okay, get out of your own way, figure out what this is. So I worked with a coach. I followed the plan myself. So it's based on the book by Dr. Sherry Lieberman called Dare to Lose. So we'll talk through all that stuff. But ultimately, like I said, I worked with a coach. I followed the program and it completely changed my life. Like the only thing that's allowed me to say I've kicked my food issues. And from there, I was like, to me, this was the nutrition education we're all supposed to know and no one ever taught us. And then I was like, everybody deserves to know this. And then why isn't this what we taught? And I became an insatiable student. I started working with clients and going to every seminar and workshop and reading every book and doing all the things. And I built my practice on the side for 12 years. So 2019, after 12 years of being a health coach, I left my full-time job, launched my podcast, Salad with a Side of Fries, and just left both feet in. The big overarching mission of everything I do is to really change the state of healthcare. And that's what, I have a bunch of ventures in that space, but that's really what brought us here.
Well, that's a great story. And I think you brought up really two very important points when it comes to dieting, because one, the resistance where people can't seem to lose the weight and everything they're trying isn't working. And two, the yo-yo, because when we lose all that weight, then we release all the toxins that's stored in that adipose tissue. And then we can get toxic overload from that yo-yo dieting. And I think people don't even realize sometimes how that's affecting them too, to drop the weight, gain it back, drop the weight, gain it back can be hard on your body too.
1,000%. And the other thing is a lot of times when we do almost whatever plan we follow, there's some semblance of eat less, move more, right? And so the number on the scale goes down for a little while and then it stops and we get frustrated and we go back to old eating habits because what we did is not sustainable and we start to gain the weight back. But when we're, in air quotes, losing that weight, sometimes what we're losing isn't even the fat. Most of the time, based on, a lot of the plans out there, what's actually coming off our body is muscle, water, and sometimes bone. So then we go back to these old eating habits, but we have less muscle on our body to be burning all that extra fuel. And we gain this weight back as fat. So like we could end up at the same number on the scale as we were before, but by body composition, we're fatter at that same number.
Yes. And people are looking at the scale often, not inches and things like that
Exactly.
too. So we're not always measuring in the right way to be able to see what we're losing. Well, let's dive in. Let's talk about how you can burn this fat without keto.
Yeah. So I think, keto has gotten so much buzz, and there's certainly some value to it. I mean, there is some research there for specific disease states and in specific populations. But I think most of us hear something on social media or somebody tells us, oh, I'm doing this, and we start to do that, but we don't really understand or know what's happening. And one of the things, my big pet peeve, among other things, but one of them with keto is that it is incredibly unforgiving. Like I sort of joke that if you breathe wrong, you knock yourself out of ketosis, which is the state where you're burning fat as your source of fuel. And what can knock us out of ketosis is a lot of living life. And one of the things I say to everybody is that if your plan does not allow for life, it's not your plan for life. Like if whatever we're doing to remove the fat and remove the weight isn't something we could continue doing for forever, it's not our plan.
I think you point out, because I want to move on forward with this, but I do want to just point out something, because I think you made a really good point that so many things knock us out of ketosis. So you might be doing keto and you're actually not in ketosis, but you don't know it and it's backfiring. I see that a lot. My husband did it for a while, and it does work a little bit better with men than women sometimes.
Yes, agreed.
But he was measuring his urine. He was he was so strict and really making sure he was in ketosis all the time. And I don't know that everyone's doing that. So we're doing this like off brand of keto anyway, that may not really be working the way you think you're doing it in the first place. And now let's go back to why we do it.
Well, exactly. And so that's the thing. Like I have a birthday, coming up. And so I'm like, if I were on keto, all of the things that we tend to think about for a birthday don't qualify as part of that plan. So I'm going to choose to figure out how to live the rest of my life and celebrate birthdays, right? And holidays and whatever else. So one of the things that I think most people fundamentally misunderstand is that whether we are burning fat or storing fat is a function of our blood sugar. So, and by the way, it happens, we are storing fat if our blood sugar is too high and if our blood sugar is too low. So kind of, do you remember the old I Love Lucy in the candy factory?
Oh, yes.
Right. Yes. So Lucy and Ethel are in this candy factory, and they're supposed to, the candy comes down the conveyor belt, and they're supposed to wrap it and put it back on the conveyor belt to go to the next station. When the conveyor belt comes at a nice, even pace, they can do what they're supposed to do. Then it speeds up. They can't keep up. Oh, by the way, I should mention that if they screw this up, they're fired. And they were trying to prove that they could keep a job. So the conveyor belt speeds up. They can't manage the pace, and they start to shove the candies everywhere, like their mouth, their hat, their pockets, anywhere, so that an unwrapped candy didn't go to the next station. Our body is sort of the same way. When food and fuel come at this nice, even pace, right? Our body can produce insulin. Insulin helps carry that fuel to our muscles and our cells to be used as energy. Our muscles and our cells can only take in so much fuel at a time. So when we eat too much at a time, when we eat high glycemic impact foods, when we sit down at the restaurant and start with the bread basket, it's like speeding up that conveyor belt. We push the button, flip a switch, whatever, speeds up the conveyor belt. Now our body is overproducing insulin to try to manage all of that. Our muscles and our cells close when they're full, but our fat cells, because they're geniuses, never close, right? All of that extra fuel and that extra insulin are stored as fat. So in real life, we might sit down at the restaurant, order super plain steamed fish and vegetables, thinking I have ordered the holy grail of meals, right? But we start with that piece of bread. It's like flipping the switch, and our body is going to end up storing that fish and vegetables as fat. So that's what happens when our blood sugar is too high. When our blood sugar is too low, and that could happen because we haven't eaten for a ton of hours, or we aren't eating regularly, or we're not eating enough because we've been told to eat less, right?
Yeah. Or even if you're eating high sugar, like you're eating the bread, then you can go up and then down too. So.
Exactly. So when our blood sugar is too low, our body, in its infinite caveman wisdom, says, if I have low blood sugar and fuel isn't coming, it must be a time of famine. So the next time I get something to eat, I'm going to store it so that I can survive because you're not going to kill me, right? So what happens, our body doesn't realize there's a refrigerator full of food that we're potentially choosing not to eat. And then we go to eat this meal. I see it a lot with men, like they don't eat all day and then they eat this massive dinner, right? Sometimes we're just busy or whatever. Our body thinks it's a time of famine. It gets that fuel and stores it for use later. Fat is fuel stored to be used later, right? The problem is later never comes. So we just keep adding to those fat stores. So our objective to burn fat and not store fat is to choose foods and eat regularly enough to keep our blood sugar in sort of like this middle zone, right? Where we're never in that fat storage high or the fat storage low. And you don't have to have like a glucose monitor to do it, right? We can do that through our food choices, through food timing and thinking about that kind of stuff. So it really isn't as complicated, I think, as everybody makes it out to be.
Yes, it's this big mystery of how to make it work, and really balancing your blood sugar is the key. Yes, I agree.
Exactly. So if we think about, to some degree, things are obvious as far as the foods that would spike our blood sugar, right? Like cookies and cake and, pasta, a bagel, right? A lot of those foods that are high in refined carbohydrates and refined sugar are definitely going to spike our blood sugar. So one of the keys to low glycemic impact eating, right, and keeping our blood sugar in that middle zone, if you're a note taker, write this down. Protein and fiber at every meal makes removing fat no big deal.
Oh, I like your little rhyme. That's a good way. I'm going to use it now. That's a good way to remember.
Protein and fiber at every meal makes removing fat no big deal. So protein is clean, lean protein. I don't care if you want that to be plant or animal or whatever, like you do you, but protein. Fiber is vegetables and sometimes fruit, right? Every single day, every time we eat, protein and fiber. And then we also need quality fat. And one day I'll figure out how to put the quality fat into the sentence. But that's really what guides us. Then we can sprinkle in those higher glycemic foods on occasion in a proper proportion, right? We want to think of those more like a condiment than a side dish or a main dish, right? Something to add some flavor and texture and interest, rather than saying this is the primary source of my nutrition. Because P.S., it's not really. Right.
Yeah, actually, and you make up a good point. When I go out to dinner, I just tell them not even to bring the bread. Don't even have it on your table. Then you'll eat that fish and you'll eat your fish and vegetables, and that will be the first thing that comes, and it's not sitting in front of you. So some of those like little tweaks can just make a difference, because
totally,
it's so hard when it's right there a lot of times.
Yeah. And if you are one of those people, right? So some of those, or you're maybe at dinner with other people and you don't want to cause a whole thing, right? Totally fine. Ask for a vegetable soup or a salad. Have something low glycemic first. then have a little bit of the bread, right? So what's hitting your system first is keeping your blood sugar stable. So if we think of the higher glycemic foods as the color red and low glycemic foods as the color white, if we eat them together, we get the color pink. Pink, right? Not as red as red. Sounds better. Not as white as white. Okay, may not be, as great, but it allows us to then make those choices. If we have more of the protein and the fiber and quality fat and less of the bread from the bread basket, or we eat that bread after we've started eating the rest of our meal, that red doesn't turn the white as dark as, right? We can sort of think about how are we putting foods together in a way that we're able to enjoy the things that we enjoy and keep our blood sugar stable so that we can live life and have a cupcake, right? So whether it's holidays or a birthday or whatever, have dessert right after your meal so that it's processing with all of the quality nutrition rather than separately sugar bombing your body and storing the whole thing as fat, or starting with that and then storing everything as fat.
Yeah, these are great tips. And I love how you make them very easy to understand, because I think they are simple things. It's just being able to get them in your life in a way that works for you. That's not like, I don't even understand what I'm supposed to do. So, when you're looking at that color, put your favorite colors and see what that mixture looks like for you.
Exactly.
Awesome. So what would you say like a typical day would look like with things that people should eat whenever they're trying to follow this kind of plan?
Yeah. So I like to say breakfast, an hour and a half to 2 hours of waking up, right? We want to get food and fuel in our system to signal our metabolism to start burning. So protein and fiber. I'm a big egg person. So today I had eggs and veggies. If you're a cheese person, add some cheese. If you like your avocado toast, great. We're going to emphasize more of the avocado for our quality fat and some sort of protein source. So that could be your eggs or a Greek yogurt or whatever makes you happy. And then less of that bread so that we're keeping it balanced, right? I think the other thing to remember is the only thing that makes a meal breakfast is that it's breaking our fast, right? It's the first thing we eat in a day. So if what you have is leftovers from dinner and they were delicious, eat that. Like, it's weird sometimes because we're not used to it, but it's kind of magical what happens. Because when I do that, I end up so satisfied and with great energy for so many hours. I'm a big fan of a breakfast salad also. And every time I tell my clients this, they think I'm crazy. And then they try it and they're like, whoa, okay. So here's the secret to the breakfast salad. Whatever greens you have and you like, whatever veggies you have in your fridge, chop them up. I'm a big person for variety. So I want a little bit of like all the things. Then make some eggs and keep the yolk runny. Put the eggs on top of the salad. The runny yolk makes like a creamy dressing when you break it up. And then sometimes I'll add like everything bagel seasoning or a little bit of balsamic vinegar or whatever. And you're able to like eat this really satisfying meal. And it feels very decadent to me.
Oh, wow. I've never tried that. So breakfast salad is a new thing. Yeah. So you don't even have to put dressing on it then, because you're using that yolk as the dressing.
Yeah. And maybe a little bit of balsamic vinegar or something. And, if you want some more flavor or whatever, but like, change it up, add a little, if you're, a sausage person or a turkey bacon person or whatever, make it to what you enjoy. And the real tweak is in adding all the vegetables to your breakfast to start your day.
Yes, because I do agree with you. A lot of breakfast foods are carbohydrate rich. So when we're looking at what we consider your breakfast foods, then you're getting more carbs than you intend to maybe to start your day generally. So it's a good way to flip it.
Yeah. And breakfast sets the tone for our blood sugar for the entire day. So, if we sort of create the chaos of the spike and the drop of starting our day with a lot of carbohydrates, we're sort of like behind the 8 ball for the entire day until we can sleep and reset and start again. So really setting yourself up with protein and quality fat in the morning, it, makes a huge difference.
This is a little bit off track of that, but another diet that a lot of people follow and is touted a lot is intermittent fasting. And it, again, works for some people, not as much for others, depending on what you have going on. And I think that's where a lot of these diets are like, okay, intermittent fasting's the way, keto's the way, paleo's the way. And so really you're saying balancing your blood sugar is key, and everyone can get value from that. But when you're talking about breakfast, when the people you're working with, do you look at timing of that?
Yeah. So we typically time breakfast based on what time we wake up. So the intermittent fasting that I'm a really big fan of is dinner to breakfast, which includes the time that we sleep, right? We generally want to end food like a couple hours before bed and then get something in our system like an hour and a half, within 2 hours of waking up, like an hour to an hour and a half. If we are expecting our body to perform during the day without fuel, we are pushing ourselves into that starvation response. So it's our sleep time that we're supposed to be without fuel, right? If somebody has challenges with insomnia or any sleep challenges or really wants to do sort of intermittent fasting, then I have them time their food with sunrise and sunset. So we eat when it's light outside. We don't eat when it's dark outside. But that is more biologically what true human intermittent fasting, is, rather than some of this sort of manipulation that we've learned.
Yeah, I do see that happen a lot. People get that confused where they're actually not eating till lunch. Instead of doing no food in the evening, they'll start at lunchtime and then eat till late and do their fasting where you're doing it in the day. And that's a good point. Like you're expecting your body then to start to be working without fuel. You're getting in that storage mode anyway by pushing your lunch to, your first meal till lunch.
Yeah. And it's interesting too, I see it all the time. I mean, we are a country of people who are overfed and undernourished, right?
Yes.
The idea that people given 24 hours to eat in the United States can't get the nutrition their body actually needs. So the idea that we're going to give our body everything it needs in a fraction of those hours, I think is also sort of setting us up.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's true. Really like focusing on your vegetables and your nutrients and everything like that is so important.
And it's not like our body says, oh, cool, B vitamins, got those yesterday, don't need it today. Like it doesn't hold on to it in that way to say, cool, I'm going to use that now, right? I mean, I sort of joke and talk about it like with exercise. It's not like we say, oh, I don't have to exercise. I went to recess once in second grade, so I'm good. Yes. Like doesn't really work that way.
Yeah, we need to keep doing it. Exactly. Would you have any tips on how to improve your metabolism in general?
Yeah, I love this one. All right. So we talked about how, if we're following a lot of these typical plans, right, we see the number and the scale go down. A lot of times what we're losing is muscle and water and potentially bone. And that actually slows our metabolism. So the other thing I see all the time is in the eat less, move more piece. Everybody's like, oh, well, move more must mean cardio. Like I need to go. First of all, I need to learn how to run. You don't. Or spend hours on an elliptical, right? And that's actually not our best approach. So all the note takers, another one for you. Muscle dictates metabolism. The more muscle we have, muscle is metabolically active, meaning muscle burns fuel all the time, no matter what. So if we want to burn more when we're sleeping, when we're sitting on the couch, when we're sitting at our desk, we need more muscle mass. So if we build muscle, we actually improve our metabolic rate. cardio is super important, right? Cardio is for our heart, right? Cardiovascular system. The point of cardio is to use your heart as a muscle. Very important muscle, right? If that one's not working, we got big problems. But we can actually use our heart as a muscle through resistance training that builds our other muscles too. So to improve our metabolism, build muscle, and every day focus on that resistance training. And then you have your cardio to use your heart as a muscle too.
That's great advice. Yes, it is. I know. I think sometimes just really making sure you're getting that ability to do it in a way that works for you is so important. Do you have any recommendations on how people can like get started, stay motivated, anything like that?
Yeah. I mean, specifically with exercise or with all of it?
Just with all of it. Like you're ready to go. You want to do this. You're going to make the changes. And then sometimes we fall back into those traps. We want to do it and we're ready, but then life happens. So I'd like actually you gave us some really good tips to start, just like those little things to think, okay, that we need to think of those little rhymes and the colors and things to get started just to keep it in. But it does happen where we get off track.
Yeah. I mean, I think, there's a few pieces to this, right? We have these tools. And I think a lot of times too, we get the whole book on day one and we're supposed to do 85 million things. And then it feels like we have no time to think about anything else. And we're overwhelmed. And then other things in life pick up and we fall off with everything, right? So one of the things is just pick one thing. If you just start with breakfast, if you just start with protein and fiber, if you just start with adding some resistance training, start with one thing and then build, right? I think a lot of times too with motivation, we're all sort of waiting for lightning to strike, to have that, now I feel like doing it, right? Or it's like, I'll start on Monday or I'll start when, and the truth is, motivation doesn't come first. Most of the time, we do the action even when we don't want to, before we feel motivated to do it. So it comes down to more of that discipline thing than really motivation, which in my world, then everybody's like, but I have no willpower. So the thing with willpower, right? You do. You have tons of willpower. We all do. We just use it in different places, right? So if we think of willpower more in terms of like that discipline or self-control, right? We have to recognize, I talk about willpower as like a refillable cup, okay? But we only have one cup. It's not like we have a cup of willpower for work and a cup of willpower for our family and a cup of willpower for our health. We only have one. So every decision and choice that we have to make in a day drinks from that cup. Multitasking drinks from that cup, right? All of these things. So even choosing what you wear, even what, order you're going to do things, what route you're going to drive to get to where you have to go, all of those choices are drinking from this willpower cup. So it's not that we don't have willpower, it's just that we're using it up and not refilling. So thinking about a piece of that for each of us is what refills your cup, right? Sleep biologically across the board refills the cup. Every day we can start with a full cup, hopefully, if we sleep well, right? Exercise can actually refill the cup. Accountability can help refill the cup. Distraction can actually help us when that cup is lower, right? So interesting. There was, you might know, do you remember like the studies with the kids and the marshmallows? And it was like, they put these marshmallows in front of the kids.
Who took it and who kept it and who ate it right away.
Yeah. And then it was like, I think it was like, if you don't eat it for however long, it may have been like 10 or 15 minutes, you get 2. Mm-hmm. The kids who were able to wait the time period distracted themselves. They played with their shoelaces. They looked around the room. They did other things. So even like, it's the same thing with the bread basket, right? If we move the bread basket, if we focus on other things, we're distracted from it, and it doesn't require our willpower not to eat it. If we have a plan for when we're going to eat it, we don't have that internal dialogue, and now we have all the willpower in the world around that bread. So really interesting, the research on willpower and self-discipline and all of these things is that the people who use it most effectively use their willpower to create habits. Because once something is a habit and it's just what we do, it actually doesn't require any brain power. So thinking about going back to what you were saying before of like, what can we do to get started and how do we stick with it? What's one habit that would make all this a lot easier, right? Is it putting your workout clothes as the first thing, like right next to your bed? So literally when you get out of the bed in the morning, you are standing on them. You know, is it like I've had some clients where we'll put their sneakers on before dinner so that dinner ends, we want to do a 10-minute walk, their shoes are already on, right? Little things. What can we do to put some habits in place so that the things that we want to happen don't require all that much brain power in the moment?
Yeah, I love those. Those little tips can make such a big difference. And I think another thing just to put on that is if you're having trouble, ask yourself why. I was noticing this with exercise because I got out of a workout routine. And like you're saying, you know, it feels terrible when you're out of a workout routine and you're getting back into exercise. You know, like 3 weeks are going to be like miserable. So you don't really want to do it, but you know, you'll get to that point where it feels good. But I was resisting it. And I was like, I know I need to, it'd be in my day. And I'm like, I'm just too busy. I'm too busy. And then I realized actually I could do it, but what is it that's making me feel like that? And it was actually that we had a flood in our basement and it was like a disaster and we had to get the walls torn out and it was just a mess down. It was a mess. And that's where I worked out. So I didn't like being down there. So actually it was the location as much as getting back in the routine. So when I really got into it and just didn't say, oh, I'm too busy, I really got to what is it that's making me resist this? I didn't like being in the environment where I worked out. So I had to change how I worked out or where it would be to get that. So I think just really digging into some of those, what's your why behind it, you know, and really thinking deep of what it is that is making you resist the change can be helpful.
Totally. Too. I mean, and maybe you don't like that activity anymore. That's cool. You know, like sometimes it's a whole like experimentation process to find something you actually enjoy doing.
Mm-hmm. And yeah, sometimes it changes, you know, maybe for a while you're into, you know, I have had that like, okay, I'll lift weights and then I'll do yoga and then I'll, you know, there's different seasons for different interests and it's okay as long as you're doing something that is helpful. Yeah. Well,
and I think the other thing that happens to us too is, especially when it comes to like fitting the exercise in, I feel like we have this idea that like, if it's not long enough, if it's not intense enough, if it's not all these things, then it doesn't count. And it all counts. 5 minutes here, 5 minutes there, 30 seconds. Like when you have, you know, those 2 minutes before a Zoom meeting when you're like, what am I going to do? What can I tackle in 2 minutes? Right? Do what I call 30, 30, 30. 30 push-ups, 30 crunches, 30 squats. It takes less than 2 minutes. You did it. Do that a couple times a day. Do it once a day just to start and move. Like it all counts.
Yeah. So do the 30, 30, 30 and then tag Jenn and I and say, did it? We got it in. And we'll respond and cheer you on. Maybe we'll tag ourselves doing it too. So
for sure.
We can all get it in together. Well, thank you so much for being here, Jenn. And how can people find you?
Absolutely. So all social media, I'm at Jenn Trepeck, JENN Salad with a Side of Fries podcast. Please, like reach out. I love nothing more than hearing from you. What was new? What was repeat, but you're glad you heard it again? Or what do you disagree with? You know, I can't wait to hear.
Great. Well, thank you so much for being here and joining us and have a great day, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.